unidentified flying object.
I'm Jack Oswald, and you're listening.
This is Hudson Hammond, and you're listening to...
I'm Richard C. Hoagland, and you're listening to...
I'm Art Bell, and you're listening to Dr. J Radio Live.
We have an unidentified flying object.
Welcome back to this very special episode of Dr. J Radio Live. As you know, we normally broadcast Monday through Thursday live, giving you Flashback Fridays or Friday Flashbacks on Friday, of course. But today, Friday, November 16th, I am bringing you a live show due to this week's circumstances. I do want you all to remember that we are internationally syndicated, starting with our home base late night in the Midlands, along with the terrestrial affiliates. And in the United Kingdom, we have Deprogram Radio, and of course their terrestrial affiliates, London, Leeds, and elsewhere, plus people listening in the EU, and thanks to a good friend and another host in South Korea, we get some people from there. Just a handful, but hey, it's pretty great. And a good percentage of you come from Netherlands and also from Germany. So good luck in Merkelland. Anyhow, as I said, today is a very special show. I bring to you not only a guest, but a very, very good friend of mine. Even on times when I am off or cannot do radio, he is someone who's been around for the longest time. I go back literally to the beginnings of 2012 with him, long before I was even really immersed into this radio. And he is more than a filmmaker. He is a researcher. He's very passionate about what he does. He's very damn good. I believe that's one of the FCC words I can't say, but very damn good at what he does. He's been the director of all of the Watcher series, all 10 of them, with the bonus and Torah codes and so much other stuff. And really, you have to see the Watchers, the most recent ones, because as I was telling Rick or Richard, we're going to say, see, I've already blurted out the name if you haven't seen it on the website, that each Watchers from 6 on, I could not understand how the heck he can make them better and better and better, but he did. So without further ado, let me introduce, now that I've already spilled the beans, Mr. Richard Shah. Rick, how you doing today?
Hey, Dr. J. It's great being on with you. I'm glad. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great that I'm actually able to be here, and I hope all you listeners are happy that we are doing something live. Now, there are several topics we're going to talk about today, and we're also going to go into areas of the unknown, which is always fun. For instance, down the line, we're going to talk about the housing bubble that happened 10 years ago. If you've seen The Big Short and you know all about it, because guess what, folks? Seems like we're getting ourselves into another bubble. Something that has truly affected me and Mr. Shah, because we both live fairly close to each other, are the damn fires, the SoCal fires. One of them started literally 15 miles away from where Richard is, and another one 6 or 7 miles, which would make it about 10 miles, maybe 11 or 12 from where I live. He could probably tell you more about that, but that was extinguished. But remember when I said the word fires, plural, that is something we are going to get to talk to soon, because we also want to plug in a very good friend who had an unfortunate incident because of the fire, but we pray that he is we were thankful and prayed that he is alive, and so is his family. But we'll talk about that soon. First, we figured here's a topic that you, the listeners, would like to hear about, because there is some brand new information. And folks, you're going to hear it first here on Dr. J Radio Live with, of course, Late Night, the Midlands, and Deprogram. So, Richard, let me ask you, the Giants of Kandahar. Before we go into the newest information, let's give the folks the background information, things that we learned from watching or listening to the interview with Steve Quayle, and then with what our codenamed Kaiser James started telling us, and then the newest information he told you. So what is the Giants of Kandahar for those people who have no idea?
Well, back in, I guess it was 2008, Steve Quayle got on George Norrie's show, Coast to Coast AM, and brought this guy who was in the Air Force and flew C-130 cargo planes and told the story of how he was told to land in Kandahar and pick up a payload. And when he got there, it was this giant that was at least, some think about 12 feet tall, loaded him up on this cargo plane, and the whole pallet was over 1,000 pounds. By the time they loaded it up, he said it was around 1,200 pounds, and took this thing back because they had killed it because it had attacked some military guys in Afghanistan. And that was the story that went out on George Norrie's show back in 2008. Fast forward to, when was that? 2015, maybe, do you think?
Yes. You mean the first time we actually started to hear it from...
Yeah, you had me on your show.
Yes, which was after I had spoken to Kaiser.
Yeah, and we were talking... I think we were talking about the Torah codes and what was going on in Israel and Hamas and all that stuff. And I was trying to explain to people, because most people go Hamas, Hezbollah, ISIS. They know they're bad, but they don't know why or what they're actually doing. So I was trying to kind of unfold that. And some of the folks were a little skeptical that was really happening, because the mainstream media basically paints a completely different image of really what's going on over there. And this guy calls, this Kaiser guy, and said, I just want to say that Richard Shaw, what he's saying right now is exactly the truth, which was really much appreciated. And then we found out that he was a military guy, that he was involved as a contract operator for the military, a problem solver, to go into these hot zones and get people out. And it was just incredible. So I said, can I please talk to you after the show? And he said, sure. So Dr. J, it was because of you that the two of us got together. It's your fault. So he called me, and he was from Ohio, and we talked for about an hour, and in an incredibly emotional response, he said that he was the guy that shot the giant. So
now, that's huge news. That's huge news, because it wasn't just him shooting a giant. Remember,
there was a whole story behind it.
Yeah. Tell what you could about it, so we could get these listeners, because I could actually, picture it in my head. The imagery of believe it was animated, or at least stills that were drawn. But you see this giant guy with these ruffy clothes coming out, and he's literally ripping people in half, soldiers literally by his bare hands. And the amount of people it took to shoot him down and kill him, or assuming, it looked like to be a him with the long beard. More importantly, how many United States soldiers were killed in the process? And
there's
if there
only
was
one that I know of that was actually killed.
Okay,
but there was a bunch of them, and it's when the giant attacked, and the guy that they attacked he was kind of like everybody's favorite, and they called him Dan the Man. And basically this giant had a spear. It was kind of like a pike, this really long pole with a kind of a shaft on the end of it that was cinched up to it. And it looked really like ancient warfare stuff. I mean, it's like, what? I mean, it doesn't make sense, but he basically skewered Dan the Man and lifted him up into the air while he was essentially shish kebabbed on his sword. And it was like no big deal for this giant to be able to do that. So that soldier was killed, and when that happened, they opened fire with, really heavy automatic artillery and shot his face off. Essentially, it's what happened. And this giant smelled terrible. He was huge. And I'm just telling you what Kaiser told me. They called in an airdrop. A chopper came by, Jolly Green Giant. It's a heavy lift chopper. They dropped a net to put him in, and they could barely lift the giant into the net. I mean, it was like it's all they could do to get that thing in there. And they airlifted him out. That was the last they saw of him. He ended up in the Kandahar airport where C-130 picked him up. Now, part 2 of the story, well, actually, there's 3 parts to the story because it's still evolving. This was the first thing that happened, and then we hear the Steve Quayle pilot saying that they picked up this giant and took him to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in the United States. That's where everything crazy seems to end up, right?
Yeah. Like, for instance, the green room, or is it the blue room at Ohio's Wright-Patterson, where I believe Nixon escaped Secret Service detail and took Jackie Gleason to show him some actual alien craft and alien tech. We do know that actually something similar happens here at Edwards Air Force Base, where they have another secret room. So when they have their air shows for all the normal people bidding money for crap that's 1,200 years old by burning chemicals to fly, we're actually having a super secret air show in one of the hangars. But yeah, as a matter of fact, the CIA or the NSA whistleblower, now you guys all know I've been in contact with him, and you will get to hear him on the show, has even affirmed to me that not only do we have the budget, you also have the secret budget within the budget, and then we have what's called, as you know, Richard, black ops. And he said black ops are so off the budget, nobody knows about it. I'm talking about not an elected.
No, that's true.
Not tenured. So that's what I think the giant went to.
I mean, I've heard about this for a long time because, as you know, Dr. Roger Lear was a close friend of mine too, and I know that you guys were close too. And I mean, Roger and I used to have really long talks. I have to say, even to this day, I really miss him. I miss those discussions we used to have because we could talk about anything. And he was just a great guy. He was brilliant, and he'd had a lot of experiences. And I knew when he was telling me a story, and I knew when he was telling the truth most of the time. And there's stuff going on out there that we're just not told about, or it's colored before we get a chance to even evaluate it for ourselves. Like, did I ever tell you that one day Roger was over at JPL, at Jet Propulsion Labs, and they were looking at rover footage from Mars, and he said it really looked great. And he said he noticed the sky was blue and the rover was like moving along the ground, and someone in the other room goes, "Hey," and couldn't tell what he said, and then just in a heartbeat, all of the monitors flipped and they all looked pink.
Wow. I didn't know about that story.
Like you would have expected it.
We were very close, but not about that story.
Yeah. So he said it's all a hoax, that it's the sky is not pink. It's there's oxygen there. There's not a lot of it, but it's enough to at least make the sky blue. So we have this impression about Mars that's completely wrong.
Oh,
we're not told the truth, and I don't know why that is. I don't know why. What difference does it make if we know that Mars has a pseudo atmosphere or not? In fact, even the moon supposedly is growing some kind of atmosphere of its own. Now, it's not breathable, but it's some kind of gaseous emission is coming out of the moon now, and a lot of the planets are getting brighter.
This goes back to talking to the last person about UFOs, how specifically that, again, when Orson Welles did the War of the Worlds and people mistakenly didn't hear about or caught on late or listened to late that they didn't know it was an actual radio broadcast of a story, and I thought it was really happening. They were flipping the F out, and these people actually thought things were going down. And I think, Richard, that this still holds true to today to some degree. If we were able to find out in a split second, hey, these creatures with advanced technology are all over us. They can infiltrate us. Everybody is not denying it because they're sitting here flying around killing us and eating us or whatever, and they look scary as heck and control us with their mind. No one's going to pay taxes the very next day. It's not going to be as calm as the movie, what was it? It wasn't Independence Day. It was the precursor to Armageddon, Deep Impact, when Morgan Freeman says everyone's going to pay their bills. No, price gouging and things like that. That's not going to happen. I mean, I can imagine the 1992 Los Angeles riots happening the moment that would happen. I mean, heck, wouldn't you want to go out in a bang and go grab what you can?
Well, sure. I mean, there's this YouTube video that came out recently, and I might have sent it to you. I apologize if I haven't yet. I try to look at a lot of stuff, and it's a problem that I have. I can't remember where I found half the stuff because there's just so much material out there. It's just unbelievable. But some of these YouTube videos are horrible. They're terribly done. But they might say something that I haven't heard before that's really interesting. And then there's others that are incredibly well done, and I have no idea who funds them. But there's one out there that's entitled, if you just look this up, What If the Earth Does Not Exist?
Ooh, interesting.
It's gotten 2.9 million views. And I think this is the right one. I'm gonna double check before I make a liar out of myself here, but it's basically about the idea that, this is it. Elon Musk came out and said, if we aren't living in a digital simulation, it would be like 1 billion to 1 chance.
Really? 1 billion to 1 chance.
That we're not living in one. And what got me thinking about this was way back when Ellie Marzulli and I were producing Watchers 2. I mean, that's a long time ago. That was in 2011. And we interviewed the late Dr. Chuck Missler, who was a really smart guy, totally into UFOs, worked for the United States Air Force for a while, was in very sensitive areas of the government, knew a whole lot of things that he couldn't talk about. But he said at the time, we're living in a digital simulation. Now, he told me that back when, and I was rolling tape on it. It's back when we didn't have chip cameras yet. And I took it back and I thought, I can't put this in the show yet because people are not going to accept this. It's just too wild of an idea. So we did Watchers 2. And I think I waited until Watchers 3 or Watchers 4. And then I put that quote that Chuck Missler said that we're living in a digital simulation. And of course, Chuck was a devout Christian and believed the miracles that are stated in the Bible. And if you look at life as being a digital simulation, it it kind of opens the door to a lot of these things that seemed impossible that did indeed occur. And that we're here going through some sort of preliminary exercise, because everyone I've talked to after that, I know this is a big departure from the Giant of Kandahar. We'll get back to that in a second, but it makes sense to me that this could definitely be the case, because people that have had near-death experiences routinely come back and say, being out of the body and being basically on the outskirts of heaven felt more real than their actual life ever felt. They had the ability to see in 360 degrees. They could feel at the bottom of their feet the same level of texture and complexity as they could with their fingertips. They could see colors that don't exist on the Earth. They could make themselves small and get inside of a flower and see how it was made. There was all of these things that they said they could do. And I've heard these same stories from more than one person. It's not like it's just one guy freaked out, overdosed on LSD or something and said all that. No, it's not like that at all. These are people that were brought back, revived in the hospital, and all had very similar experiences. I mean, they had experiences that were tailored to their own life and to their own life experience, but they still, a lot of them said the same kind of thing. So you need to watch this. It's kind of long hair scientific, but if you go to What If the Earth Does Not Exist on YouTube, I thought it was extremely well done, and it goes into quantum theory and all of that, but that basically light is not particle, it's waves, but under certain conditions, the light, when it's passing through these slits, it does the same thing it would if you were designing something in a video game. And that's what freaked me out.
When you said that we are living in this simulated reality, this reminds me of a very great film, Dark City. Have you ever seen that?
A long time ago I saw it. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, that movie is
and then there's
so
the 13th floor.
I've not seen 13th floor.
I can't hardly rent it anymore. I tried to get it on Netflix. I don't think they have it. You might be able to buy like a regular DVD off of Amazon, something I can check to see if anyone's still selling it. But I mean, there's I think that has the really cool song at the end, if I remember right, Erase and Rewind. It is an incredible tune. But anyway, there are certain things in ancient texts that have always been astounding to read and go, how could that happen? You know, there'll be this rapture. We'll meet the Lord in the air, in the clouds. Another passage talks about, and the sky will roll back as a scroll. Another passage talks about the sun being 7 times brighter than it is currently. And oddly enough, the Hopi Indians say the same thing, that we're approaching that point. And then there's also this passage that talks about the Son of Righteousness. Now, this isn't talking about Yeshua or anything like that. It's the Son, S-U-N, of righteousness. People who are evil will be destroyed by it. People who are good will be healed by it. Now, physically, that makes no sense. But if all of this is a simulation, if we're part of a program that has been meticulously created, then a lot of things make sense that didn't make sense before, like the first order of creation, let there be light. And as you talk about that, and I'm going off on a tangent here, and I apologize.
No, hey, like I said, today's a free-for-all for you, Mr. Bonner. Enjoy it.
It's let there be light, and there was light, it says, okay? That's the first thing that God does in creation. But then on the 4th day, he created the sun and the moon. So it's like, huh?
So how was the light there before the sun came out?
Exactly.
Yes,
And I've talked about this with Rabbi Glazerson. I said, and he said, it's a different kind of light.
No, let me say this real quick. For people who are not familiar with Rabbi Glazerson, or who may have missed the last show or not seen it on YouTube, which, by the way, folks, remember, everything's on YouTube. Everything, if you miss any part of it, you want to rehear it, if you've been one of the people who's asked a question, go to the YouTube channel. Yes, we've fallen a little bit behind, but chances are, if it aired, it's going to be there, and we're working on getting all the past stuff. But real quick, just tell people who he is, because he's a key figure, especially with the last show we did, which focused 2 hours on a documentary you made, and of course, what's happened since then. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I got interested in the Torah codes a long time ago, and got sucked into meeting Rabbi Glazerson and Professor Eliyahu Rips had no idea how this happened. My friend ended up sitting on an airplane, which put him next to Professor Robert Haralick, who was writing software for these guys. And suddenly I was connected to all of the world experts, and I had done nothing. I just merely had told my friend Lee that I thought this was a really fascinating subject, and someday I'd like to do a documentary about it. Boom. Next thing I know, everybody's here. Glazerson and Rips, for some reason, because they were doing some other meetings, were here in Los Angeles, and I had their cell phone number, and I just drove in and said hi. I mean, it's like, and normally at the time, both of them lived in Jerusalem. So, I didn't have the money to go to Jerusalem. I didn't have, any reason for these guys to want to talk to me or spend time with me, or if they even would. And since then, it's been an incredible ride. That was 2006. And now we've become really close friends. So Rabbi Glazerson is an expert in ancient Hebrew and how things are worded. So his tables that he makes for the Torah codes are always really interesting. But he also has a lot of insights about miraculous events, the Tower of Babel, and all of that. If you look at the Tower of Babel, if we're living in a digital simulation, makes the Tower of Babel a lot more understandable. Maybe we had a DNA upgrade or a downgrade. I don't know what you'd call it, that the language was changed, or maybe we went to level 2 in the whole game. I don't know. I mean, it's like, but it does make sense that you could change anything, make anything happen, do any kind of miracle. Anything would be possible, because we think we live in a physical world when actually that's only part of it. And Glazerson always said, oh yes, it's the physical world that hides the spiritual world. He always says that.
Have you been getting, now I hate to interrupt this, but I just keep getting these darn notices from the LASD, Los Angeles Sheriff's Department. Have you been getting them too about fires and something about Taft right now? I mean, again, I didn't mean to switch topics, but it just seems as I'm trying to watch the chat.
Oh, did you get something on your phone just now?
Yeah, I just did. I'm curious if you get these. I don't even know how I got on the list, to tell you the truth, but yeah, I could tell you exactly what
did they say there's a fire in your area?
Okay. Yesterday morning, repopulation of areas impacted by Woolsey Fire continues in Malibu today. This is just now. As repopulation continues, Taft High School is deactivated as temporary shelter. Ooh, that means that many people have started to move our way.
Well, we can talk about the fires too, because I was just there yesterday. And now I hear a siren.
Yeah, I'm going to let you finish
outside.
this thought, because that was one of the things I wanted to mention. Because when we do get to the fires, there's somebody I want us all to send our brain positive thoughts. Yeah. So
we live close to a fire station, so we're always getting sirens. And I mean, this fire was a monster. For people that haven't been following this, you can't imagine the scope of this fire. I have a video up on the Pinlight website. You can watch it.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I was hoping we'd have time to throw this out before the show. I probably should have sent it on Twitter. As a matter of fact, I'll do it right now. I'll give everyone the link on Twitter. Remember, at DrJRadioLive, DrJRadioLive, and it'll be a link directly to Richard's website, and it's pinlight.com. It's a great video that he's filmed with his drone, with the commentary, and literally, folks, you will see what the heck is happened here. And this is just a small portion. Now, Richard, you talked about 100,000, homes that were, ruined, but not 100,000 homes, 100,000 acres. But I believe that count was a couple days ago, if you count here in NorCal.
Yeah, it's constantly. I mean, they say they have it 60% contained, but it's such a vast area. And for people that aren't used to this, I mean, there's Topanga Canyon, you know where that is, but Topanga runs all the way from where you and I live clear to Pacific Coast Highway. I mean, you can get on that, and you end up eventually twisting through the canyons and all that. Well, that street between, I guess, I'm not sure where they clamped it off, but it might be as far as like the 101 to the PCH, Pacific Coast Highway, is closed. And Pacific Coast Highway is closed from Topanga all the way down to Point Magoo to the Port Hueneme Naval Base. I mean, that's an incredibly long distance. I mean, I drove yesterday just looking at all these places. When I got home, I looked at my trip recorder, and I'd driven 130 miles just to try to get footage.
And what are some of the other names that they've used?
There's the Hill Fire. There's the Woolsey Fire. And that's just Southern California.
Yeah, not including Northern California.
Yeah.
And like I said, when I was talking to you when the fires were affecting me, when I had to cancel the show, folks, that was the reason what happened on Tuesday. And we just had some bad luck, and I wasn't feeling well yesterday, possibly because of the fires and what the doctor said. But that's besides the point, is the fires were truly affecting me. And Richard, remember, I was telling you, being in this neighborhood since 1984, not necessarily at the home that I live in, where I built a studio out of in one of the rooms that was perfect enough to do it, I had never in my life had felt such effects. And I remember I was telling you, there were times I would go out and you would see the orange of the fire. You'd stick your hand out. I mean, you got nothing but ash that kept falling. You looked at any car or anything, and there was just a layer of it every moment of the day. And yet at that time, I cannot say my eyes were burning or anything like that. Sure, as a child, you're told, don't go play outside if the quality's so bad. We're sitting there launching model rockets and, playing baseball and other little stuff and, football. We're kids, you know what I mean? But all through the fires, because we're in, the desert, where the desert meets the ocean, constantly have dry brush, specifically in the last 20 years. These fires, Richard, are a yearly occurrence. It's actually boggles my mind how many sad people are losing their homes. It's like
it's true. And we have to get into that, because there's layers of information concerning the fires that I think is a really interesting discussion. And I'm remiss because I didn't finish your question about the Kandahar Giant and
I said, I want you to finish so we gave the background of the Kandahar Giants, but you learned something new, because I do want to get into what I was telling you about the fires, and this is why I've sent it out. And by the way, for Katie, if you're on, by the way, remember, Katie and Daryl Neely are not just the station managers of L&M, they are hands-on engineers of the shows. They do so much more. I am also tagging you, Katie, so if you could send this out for anybody listening, that way you guys and gals listening can see this short film that Richard did. It's only under 2.5 minutes. You could see it that way. When we start talking about it, you can get just an idea, a glimpse of what we could see. And mind you, when we talk about the friend of ours home who got burnt, he can't even get to it, because so many streets are blocked off and people are missing and people are dead. So let's finish with the Giants so we could segue into this horrific problem.
Yeah. Well, I thought what was interesting about the Giant, and this problem came up when we were filming Watchers 10, the story about the Giants in that, and people have beaten me up because we basically did kind of still images of the Giant, but we just to get those images drawn and animated was like $2,500, and we don't have like a $50 million animation budget to where we could do this correctly. Or we would have done it.
Yeah.
We would have made it look real.
Right.
And I know the people that can do it. It's not a matter of not having the connections. It's the matter of paying for it. And, Watchers is pretty much a privately distributed set of videos where you basically can get 11 DVDs for $100, which is a really incredible deal. So with savings like that, you can't afford to put too much money into the film, or you never make any income. Basically, you lose money like crazy.
Yeah, yeah.
And we already have lost money on some of the episodes that they, we couldn't market them enough, but we wanted to get the information out there. It was exciting to me and LA too, to just let people know what's going on. So in Watchers 10, we did this story about the Kandahar giant, and we interviewed Kaiser that we just talked about, and also another guy, military guy, that LA bumped into at a meeting in Oceanside, and he was aware that there was a giant being that had been captured. It was all over in his network of friends when he was in Afghanistan. So LA said, would you talk about it? So we interviewed him. He's in Watchers 10. And he said the same thing, but his observation about it was a different date than what the original giant was supposedly captured. And then the pilot that flew the giant out, his giant, that as big as the giant was that he described, the one that Kaiser described to me was bigger still. And then I find out, because I talked to him 2 or 3 days ago, he called me out of the blue. I never know when he's going to call, because he's on a job, he's on an assignment in the Middle East, or he's busy doing stuff he can't talk about. But we got to talking about the Kandahar giant thing that we had done together, and he said, yeah, he said, the only thing is that the one that we shot was a couple years earlier than what the guy that was on Steve Coyle's interview was talking about. And he said our giant was really big, 15, 16 feet tall.
Now,
so then I'm saying, you mean there's 2 of these things?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for saying that. That's the new thing. And that's what you were telling me the other day. And I said, I made the supposition, look, if there's 2 of these giant MFers, okay, well then who made them? Who was their mother? Do they have other offspring? Is there a civilization of them? Is the reason they're in these caves because they know that if they're around us, they're going to both eat us, kill us, and we'll end up killing them? I mean, I doubt there's just one anomaly
not
from
nice
a human.
people.
No, they're not. I mean, I remember hearing one of the stories where literally a soldier, if not soldiers, were ripped in half by their bare hands. And I believe it was Steve Quayle who talked about multiple soldiers being killed, as opposed to what Kaiser told us. But it's a very, very sad story indeed.
Well,
but yeah,
that's why if the stories don't match,
then it
doesn't mean it's not the truth. It just means that there's more than one experience that we're talking about.
That's right. That's absolutely right. And I definitely agree with you there. It's just a very, very sad case. But again, that goes to show you this fits in cryptozoology. Some people still say Loch Ness. Maybe Loch Ness has died, but I don't think that one creature is on its own. It just can't be a mutation from 100 years ago of something else. I think Loch Ness is maybe something that was left over from a period where other things should have died. Maybe it was in a safe place. Maybe it's just because of where it is or where it was near the bottom of the ocean.
Well,
maybe
I think there is indeed the whole Bigfoot thing. I don't think it's a hoax.
Yes.
But I think that
talks
I think it was a genetic experience gone awry. Is what I think it was.
Well, don't they also say that about Chupacabra? That was a genetic thing that sort of got out of a lab in Brazil or in Puerto Rico?
I don't know. I mean, that's something different. I mean, that's not a humanoid style being that actually is intelligent. And there's so much we don't know. I mean, again, if we're all living in a digital simulation, anything goes, right?
That's right. That's right. And
Anything goes.
Anything does go. And this is a really sad thing, and I'm just going to say it as best as I can because I have knowledge on a lot of things, not very much knowledge on technical things, and I'm not a science guy. I'm a math guy, a law guy, a researcher, journalist, whatever. But you may have heard about this. Now, this is totally, again, total tangent on something else, but Monsanto, I believe it was a strain of wheat they were working on, and instead of trying to create something by manipulating the DNA of the actual wheat, of trying to make it immune to pesticides, they put pesticides in the DNA. I mean, isn't that the stupidest thing you could think of, Richard? Why the heck would you try to perfect something, but instead of perfecting it the way you should perfect it, you're actually making it far worse by ensuring that a farmer doesn't have to spray pesticides for you to absorb them, unless, of course, pesticides is what they wanted. And us living in California, Richard, for all those people who smoke what's now legal marijuana, Monsanto threw a bid to buy the full cultivation rights in California. So again, things that go on with the government creating and manipulating the DNA of things is no longer a conspiracy theory. It's actually more of a conspiracy fact, and sometimes not even a conspiracy, Richard. They tell us as much as they can. And you might know this, the Weekly World News, before it was shut down, was started by the CIA. They wanted to put in the real stories with the BS stories to downplay what was really happening.
There was a lawsuit against Monsanto recently by a guy who said he contracted cancer from eating food that was treated to ignore the pesticide Roundup, because that's what it's a weed killer that they've hardened these plants so that will grow, even though you've sprayed them down with Roundup. And a lot of people think that's why the bees are dying, because this stuff is toxic to them. And if we kill all the bees, then there's no more plants. And yet this kind of gets into now we can talk about the fire some more, because there's so much to talk about.
As we're talking about fires, I got another LASD SIB. LA County Recovery webpage and damage reporting now available for those impacted by the Woolsey fire. Again, and it says reply with a friend's forward number to forward, which I'm actually going to do to you, Richard, if you're not getting these. But you live close to a station, so you get them. But I'm going to make sure you have this, because this is something that I think you need to have in general, because I tried to do this hours later last time and it didn't work. So let's talk about the fires now. Okay, now we're going to start with SoCal. I believe it was SoCal before it went up to NorCal. I mean, those are separate, different fires, and they've killed 41 people. Like I said, 200 people missing. And let me just say this first as we go into that. A good friend of mine, someone I've known well over 6 years, a great guest, and like I said, a great friend, but someone who you've known a lot longer or more closer to him than me. And he lost his house, and I know Katie is on with us and she knows about this, but I was hoping that you could tell people what happened to our poor friend and tell them who it is and literally what he lost, and where people, if they want, if they can, are interested in helping him rebuild his life for him and his family, what they can do and where they can go. But let's mention that, and then we'll talk about the origins, which makes this the very shady fire, which I believe it to be.
Well, sure. You're referring to L.A. Marzulli, my friend and partner in the Watchers series, when we were working together on that project. He's off kind of doing his own thing at the moment, but he was doing a conference in Dallas when this fire broke out, so he wasn't here. And I was texting him what was going on, and we didn't know if his house was involved in the fire because we couldn't get in there to look at it. They had closed all the roads up. We still can't get in there to look at it. And the picture that's on my website is basically the picture on my website from Inter.
The first picture.
You were, yeah.
The one that I tweeted out, by the way, pinlight.com, PINLIGHT.com.
Yeah, that picture was taken by an actual fireman. And that's how we got it. And LA texted it to me.
I thought you did, but then again, that goes back to what you were telling
I did the video below it.
Yeah.
I did the video. So the fireman snapped this on his cell phone. You can see the hood of his vehicle in the shot at the bottom. So it's basically not a 16:9 shot, and I've taken it in and tried to fix the color on it because it looked kind of green when I got it. So before I posted it, I did that. But that's the only shot of it we have. But LA was able to get in a couple days ago and actually see it, and there's nothing there. And I said, so what about like the storage room with all of the books and DVDs? And he said it's just ash. Jeez. And we've never seen a fire this hot before. I mean, you'll see pictures of cars where their wheels have melted off their bodies. Now, I've never seen that. I saw it last year at the fire in Northern California. You probably noticed that there were like streams of melted aluminum running out from under cars, like it was smelted.
Well, let me tell you this. Do you remember what I told you that you were in disbelief Wednesday when I was watching the mainstream network KTLA out here in California, Los Angeles? And that showed this couple who went to their only home that was destroyed in the fire, and in their fireproof safe, where they had passports, birth certificates, anything else important, that stuff was burnt. How is that possible? Unless I was wondering, is there an accelerant? And then when we talk about the conspiracy of what was burned or where it began, and that begs the question.
There's just, it's like peeling an onion. There's layers to this fire thing that don't make sense. They don't make physical sense. And it's like a conspiracy theory, but yet we can't call it that because these things have actually happened. So then we have to look at it scientifically. How could this have been this hot? Why are these fires so prevalent when they never used to be this bad? I mean, you'd have a fire and they could put them out, but these are like monster fires. These just continue to burn like through almost everything. I mean, like you don't think of your barbecue pit as being, you'd think that would be fireproof, right? Or metal objects within your house or filing cabinets and things like that. Those things are now burnt. They're like melted into nothing.
Yeah, that's
like these are steel objects and stainless steel, aluminum. They're being basically just completely destroyed. So we have to get back to where this fire started. This is, to me, the most intriguing part. It started about, actually, in the wee hours of the morning, a week ago Thursday.
Yeah, eight days ago.
Yeah, and it started on the same hill that the Rocketdyne plant had been sitting decades ago. And unless you study what the Rocketdyne plant was, you don't understand the significance of that. And there's videos up, and I sent you some links on that later. If you want to post them on your website, Dr. J, you can do that. But there's a really excellent documentary that's up on YouTube about Rocketdyne. Basically what they were, they called themselves Rocketdyne because that's what they were doing. They were working on rocket engines. They were developing space technology. They were highly involved in the Mercury space program, which was the same technology that put John Glenn in orbit. That's what they did there. They were also dabbling in nuclear power. And this was a long time ago. I mean, I think they started building reactors in 1949.
Now, didn't they have a meltdown from the saltwater reactor or something like that in
Yeah, they
59?
built 10 reactors. They were sodium reactors. Now, sodium is not salt. It's a metal. It's
So
like a
it's not
liquid
water.
metal.
It's not
Yeah.
water. Yeah.
And what they did, they had 10 reactors. And, you know about control rods. Everybody's heard about that and kind of understands what that is. You can push the control rods in and slow the reaction down or speed it up by how far these rods are put in. Well, in one of the reactors, it got so hot that the nuclear rods got so hot that they crumbled into the guides that they were supposed to go in. They couldn't control the speed of the reaction, and it was basically going into like thermal runaway. And so nowadays, these reactors are like on a wall from pictures I've seen, and the rods, you kind of slide them in horizontally. But back then, the reactors were like built. The face of the reactor was like built over like what. According to drawings I've seen, it looked like they made concrete pits in the ground, put all of the reactor elements down at the bottom, and then the face of it was kind of laid down on top of it horizontally, and a machine could lift and lower rods from the top. Basically, it was kind of looked like a gravity feed kind of setup. I mean, this is really ancient technology, so I don't have all the answers to that other than just crude drawings that I've seen. But what they had to do, these guys had to get dressed up in radiation suits. They had to get a motorized winch out and unscrew the face to the reactor and lift it off. I mean, that's like a terrifying prospect to have to do something like that, exposing yourself to just full-on radiation. And like if you weren't wearing protective gear, you'd be dead in seconds, right?
Yes.
And these guys had to go down into the core and clean out those slots so that they could put the face back on and stop the reaction. And they managed to do it, which is to their credit. 22 guys died in the process of doing this. Hardly anybody knows this happened. This was in 1959. And then they had all of this nuclear debris and waste products and radioactive material and plastic sheeting that they walked on, and their suits and everything was highly contaminated, incredibly contaminated. And plus, when one of the phases of this whole operation, they had to ventilate radioactive gas into the atmosphere or the reactor would have exploded. And that gas went into the surrounding area and all through San Fernando, and we'd have no idea where all it went. But it was expelled. I'm not telling you a story here. This is all documented, and you can watch it in this documentary that's on YouTube. It's all true when I'm saying it was covered by the main networks in 1979. People have forgotten about it, essentially. So what they did, they had all of this nuclear waste, and they put it in this pit, which essentially was like a small lake on their property. And they dropped in this canister of sodium, which when it hits water, it catches on fire. They dropped all of their clothes and their plastic sheeting and all of the radioactive pieces that had to be removed into this water, dropped in this sodium canister on top of it, and then with a .30-06 rifle punctured it, and it basically burnt everything. And all of that radioactive waste material was expelled into the atmosphere.
Now, this is why I was telling you that I'm worried about our damn fires right here, because the effects I've been feeling, and knock on wood, I hope to God that with the doctor who gave me prednisone and inhalers, so I'm talking privately to you folks out there, probably from the inflammation from the smoke, and because I've had a lot of the smoke inhalation being upstairs when I'm at home, as opposed to being anywhere else like downstairs, because the smoke is rising. And that's one thing. Is my question is, are we getting exposed to radiation from the damn fire?
Well,
Because
when
we
I
already
first
know
heard where it started and knew what
Yeah.
had happened there, I'm going, that's highly suspicious. Why did the fire start on that same hill where Rocketdyne's lab was and where they had planned to do a decontamination of it for years? And they've done some work, from what I understand. They don't tell us anything. The mainstream media will, of course, not tell us anything.
Nope.
And
Not the Clinton News Network.
no, especially not them. But essentially, what is going on is hidden to the general public to not create a panic. But the people that lived in that area had cancers that happened in the decades post that meltdown, and cancers that were hideous, where people were losing their eyes, where children were getting cancers, growths on their retina, and had to have their eyeballs removed surgically. These are cancers that are so rare, it'd be like 1 in a million would have that happen. And they had, like, I don't know, 30 people have those kind of cancers. If you watch that video, you can get all of the details on it, because I'm not a computer. I don't have all of this written down, because this interview that we wanted to do today just kind of happened at spur of the moment. So I haven't been able to put my normal amount of preparation into just giving you facts and figures, but they're all in that really well done documentary. And NBC reported on it, ABC, all of the networks in those days. This was they reported on it 20 years later in 1979. And basically revealed what happened and interviewed people. And there were people sick and dying from having been there. And this was a lovely community, and there were streams and creeks running through it that the kids were playing in. Who knows what kind of radiation levels are in there. And some of the radioactive elements have decayed since those days.
Yeah.
We hope to God that it's, there's different kinds of radioactivity. Plutonium is the most deadly and has 600,000 year half-life. There's uranium 234 isotope. There's cesium and strontium and all these different kinds. And some of them have much shorter half-lives. And I'm hoping that the ones that ended up in that area are the good kind and not the kind that will be there forever. But no one tells us that. I did hear, however, when I was studying this a couple of years ago, that the government was trying to encourage joggers to not jog near the old facility. And why would they say
I've been
that?
hearing that all my life, and all my life, since obviously this happened decades before I was born, two decades exact, 59. I was born in 79. I've actually been hearing, hey, that's not safe. And as a matter of fact, every home in the San Fernando Valley has been at risk. And, this is pretty stupid sound to say, but when I was always watching a television show or a movie and they talk about the Valley or Valley Girls and this and that, I was like, wait a minute, they're talking about us. But the point is this whole San Fernando Valley has essentially been affected. And, I guess fallout could be a possible term.
Now basically if this area was targeted to be burned as a cover-up, now, I'm not saying that that I think it was, or someone told me that it was, or anything like that. I'm not saying that. I'm not intimating that. But it is darned strange that that's where the Woolsey fire started. I mean, right in the Santa Susana area where this plant existed in the 50s and had a major meltdown. It's part of our history that nobody really knows about here in California. People got sick. So suddenly there were several web articles that came out with real honestly concerned people that we were being irradiated from the Woolsey fire. And I don't know if you saw some of those articles. I tried to send them to you.
Yeah, no, I everything that you send me, and I thank you for that. That's what I tell you when I don't talk to you, is because in my off time, which is very limited, and most people are asleep in the world, I do catch up on that because I need to be filled in on what's going on. And you are able to tell me from things like the fire. I mean, most recently we talked something you sent me, another thing about Q. Also, again, we'll talk about shortly about the bubble again, and you know how that started us in the Big Short. But yeah, I want to thank you for all the cool stuff you sent me. I'm gonna make a habit out of tweeting it all that for all those people out there. Just remember, all you have to do for Twitter is follow Dr. J Radio Live. I mean, if you're listening to the name of the show, folks, then you know the name of every account. I say this every show, and I'm gonna say it again at the end. Doesn't matter what you are on, what social media aspect or whatever you think. If you just have to take a guess, the account name is DrJRadioLive, LIVE. But yes, Richard, I do get them, and I've read them, and I gotta say I'm actually been a little startled because going back to what I was saying near the beginning, I don't know if these effects that I've been having from the fire, fortunately, I don't think that I'll be burned down, and me and you can both go southeast away from this. You probably remember this a few days ago or I remember last Friday at least, trying to get to the city. 101 North was closed down. For those people who live on the West Coast and know about the 101, you know, it's supposed to run parallel to PCH, but essentially you could not go into Calabasas, Thousand Oaks area. It was just forget about it. You know this. And so two people, one of them is going to be a guest on very soon, and the other was Rebecca Roth. She was the 9/11 flight attendant. She landed earlier that day, but she has the most accurate story of 9/11. And if you haven't heard her, definitely listen to that interview on my YouTube channel, and I will bring her back on soon. Her and Gerald O'Donnell both called me, Richard, to ask if I'm okay because of the proximity of me to the fire, which to you and sadly L.A. Marzulli and other people, we know Preston Dennett too. More importantly, they were asking questions that made it seem that there's a conspiracy, that this fire is not just, hey, something happened by accident, blew out of control, that it is actually here to affect us, probably kill some people, maybe cause some radiation sickness, and something we talked about yesterday, that they were suggesting that accelerants were also added for this fire if the wind and the dry brush weren't enough. But then that also begs the question, if something's already burnt and you're looking at hills and mountains that are just black, no vegetation left from previous fires, what sort of fuel is there to burn again? But the bigger the fire, Richard, then the president can declare a national emergency, and FEMA and the federal money will start coming in. And being as broke as this state, California, has been, I would not be surprised if...
there's that theory too, that the fires were intentionally started just to get money from the federal government. I mean, that I've heard that too. But one of the articles that I was referring to was from a publication called Los Angeles Magazine, and the title to the story is California Department of Toxic Substances Control says rumors of radioactive ash from the Woolsey fire are unsubstantiated. I mean, that's what they're saying, and they have an update here from November 13th, and I'll read it to you real quick so everybody can hear this.
Yeah, please.
It says California Department of Toxic Substances Control scientists were able to access the SSFL site, that's the Santa Susana site, and access data collected. We confirmed that the SSFL facilities that previously handled radioactive and hazardous materials were not affected by the fire. Russ Edmondson, the department's media information officer, tells Los Angeles, our multi-agency team took measurements of radiation and hazardous compounds both on the site and in the surrounding community. The results from this initial round of testing showed no radiation levels above background levels and no elevated levels of hazardous compounds other than those normally present after a wildfire. Those preliminary findings are consistent with the previously reported information supplied by the CDTSC. Now, we all know that these kind of statements, you have to still analyze it yourself. I don't expect to ever be told the truth by a mainstream magazine. They may indeed be telling us the truth, but people have written in and they have some Twitter comments and says, for the love of God, why isn't the city or any news outlet reporting on possible nuclear contaminated ash coming from the Santa Susana site? The public has a right to know. Another guy says, parts of Santa Susana Field Lab, Rocketdyne, where the Woolsey fire started, is highly contaminated and radioactive. Stay indoors. Do not breathe the air. It is very dangerous. Now, these are people that have written in. And the only way we would ever know is if we had a Geiger counter and could actually take our own measurements and, see how many...
Now, speaking of a Geiger counter, if I'm not mistaken, when I know you went to the lab, and I don't recall the name, where you tested that cannonball thing that sort of fell from the sky in the farmer.
Oh, right, yeah.
And also Roger Lear's alien implants. They had a Geiger counter there, right? Did Roger Lear have one?
No, I don't think Steve may have done it and not told me because he has some additional equipment, but basically we used a radio frequency monitor. We also had a Gauss generator, Gauss field measurer, and all of those things reacted to it. Now, it might have been just because this thing was mostly made out of titanium, and maybe there's some magnetic fields that when you start grinding on that stuff, that it actually naturally generates. It could very well be the case. I don't think that sphere that Jaime let us take samples of and that I actually sliced a piece off of using a Dremel Moto tool that I brought to Mexico with me. When we looked at it under electron microscope, there were fibrous material. I don't know if you remember that photo in Watchers where it's in Watcher 7. And there was this strange microscopic set of fibers that were sticking up out of the metal. But in my study on these kind of space vehicles, those canisters were used to hold the propellant for moving the satellites around when they were in orbit. And in order to do that, and so they wouldn't leak, they used a fiberglass mat inside of them. And I think that's actually what we were looking at.
Again, and this is 8 days into the fire. And didn't you say yesterday they were projecting them tomorrow? I noticed the air quality being a little better today. I'm not seeing all the smoke coming from the west of me anymore.
There's not the giant fires like there once were. They're kind of sporadic now.
For SoCal. Unfortunately, not for NorCal yet, huh?
Yeah, I don't know what's going on in Northern California at the moment.
Well, again, thankfully we were safe considering that second fire was so damn close to where you live. And for those people out there who don't know, I live just a handful of miles from Richard. I could probably walk there. It would take several hours, but I could do it. I could ride a bike quick, but it's a 5-7 minute ride in a car because I don't drive the exact speed limit. The point is we have another good friend who lives a little bit west of me and more south of you, Richard, and that's Preston Dennett. And there's over 1 million people in the SFE right now, the San Fernando Valley. And if the fire was able to start jumping east of Topanga and got to where we were, and because of the winds, I could see how it could have gone from house to house to house and forced us to evacuate. That was something.
The other thing, like we were talking about the speed that this was burning and the temperature in which it was burning, and why trees were being just like torches, and we know that the humidity was really in the single digits out here, and we know that these trees hadn't had any rainfall in many months and were really dry, and we know all of those things, but why all of the stuff would burn the way it did. And I mentioned it to Ali Marzulli. I said, I have my own theories about it, which they'll never mention. But we know that that California, at least down here, has been chemtrailed out of its mind for decades. They're out chemtrailing again yesterday and today. In spite of the fires and everything else, they're chemtrailing us. It's like, great. And we know that one of the ingredients in chemtrails is nano-sized particles of aluminum. And aluminum is a known fire accelerant.
Yep.
And if everything's coated in aluminum powder, essentially, it's going to burn like heck.
Now, let me ask
I
you
think
this.
that's what's happened.
Imagine us breathing is burning aluminum. I mean, I can't even, I've never read about it, but that is not something that would have been happening 150 years ago or anything like that, because who would have thought that we have to worry about stuff like this, as if the fire and the actual smoke from burning wood and other things wasn't bad enough. Now we have these other added elements that mean you have to breathe along with these millions of people that just here, the people who have lost their homes, Thousand Oaks, Simi Valley, and other places.
And there's several YouTube videos up there with people who seem very level-headed that are talking about that they believe there's some kind of particle weaponry being used to start these fires. Now, before you go, oh, that's totally absurd and all of that, we know we have the laser technology to do it because, the government has shown us these giant lasers they've developed, and I'm sure they got stuff way more powerful than that we've never seen.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think that's been a given.
If you can take one of those little handheld green laser pointers like I use at conventions to point at the screen, if you can light a match with that little thing, then imagine what you could do if you had a several million watt laser mounted to some satellite or something.
This is a little off the topic, but it goes with regard to the laser pointers. You recall Dr. Philip Corso when he was given that, I guess it was the three cabinet metal shelf, and it had a file cabinet, and he had actual technology, which means that for him to get that, which was just the leftover stuff they could remove from the crashes at Roswell, because there was two craft, if I'm not mistaken, that were there according to Stanton Friedman, and what the evidence seems to point to versus what Jesse Marcel ran into with the farmer Mac Brazel, as opposed to what the group of geologists found in a whole other area. But the first laser pointer that he was talking to, he said it would put a light, against the wall. The problem was the longer he kept the light on, the light or the light on the wall would actually start to burn into. So he suggested it was some sort of cutting tool. My question or my theory would be, what if when they emulated this device, these laser pointers, unlike what's available to civilians like you and I do know when my father worked as an aerospace engineer, he talked about this laser cutter that was similar to one of those super high power water cutter that would cut through metal. But they use laser cutters all the time now to actually cut through sheets of metal and different things like that. So this is technology that's no longer even classified.
Yeah, exactly. We're not revealing any secrets here, because we know they have this stuff. They've shown it to us. How they've mounted it and how they're using it, we don't know. But I thought what was really interesting in one of the YouTube videos that are exploring this theory that maybe we're under attack, because we are in a civil war in this country. It's not openly out there, but it's like an electronic war. You can kind of tell that that's really what's going on right now. It's between the radical left and the conservatives and the Antifa and all of that. I mean, this is a real thing that's happening. But there's a video out there that shows fire damage in California. This giant mansion, not touched by the fire at all. Next door to it, the trees are standing. They're not burnt. And there's a mansion that was sitting on a foundation next to the other big mansion, and it's nothing but ash left to it. All the trees around the house that had turned to ash are standing and were untouched by the fire. Just the house is gone.
That's very sad.
The other house next to it is fine. The house in the middle of these two other huge houses was burnt to the ground. Now, normally that's not normal. A fire comes sweeping through, it burns all the trees and the shrubs in the area, just totally mows everything down in a straight line, and the house goes with it. But in this case, it was just the house that was burnt.
Yeah.
Now, explain to me, please, how that
happens. Yeah. Exactly. Through physics and common freaking sense, that is not very normal at all.
No, I didn't make the video.
Sick.
I'm just reporting on what I've seen.
Yes. And again, I hope everyone does have a chance to at least get a glimpse of what me and Richard live near right now by going to pinlight.com. Again, I put it out on Twitter. You should all be able to see it. Again, at DrJRadioLive. I also tag Neely Official at Neely Official, and you should be able to find that link to Pinlight, and you'll see two things. First, that still photograph of poor L.A. Marzulli's home and the two cars that are burnt, and underneath that drone shot that Richard was able to film with his drone. And it's amazing because, and that's just a glimpse of it, folks. Mind you, he can't even get to where L.A.'s home is. And again, Richard,
several miles from there. I mean,
this goes to what I was telling you earlier. How in the hell is a fireproof safe? Fireproof, meant to withstand, a hell of a lot, very hot fire. How would things in that be destroyed if the whole purpose is meant for it to survive fires, unless there was some accelerant in this fire? And that is what one of the shady things. And mind you, as I was telling you, two independent people who don't know each other, guests of mine. Of course, me and you have both been getting called from people all over the place asking about this, because even family in Greece saw this on their local Greek news of what's happening here in California. But the fact that it's now a federal emergency, it's kind of hard for people to have not heard about these fires. But the fact that we've been, affected, there was times, Richard, because you are closer to the hills and you were closer to Simi Valley than me. If that fire, that second one, that was 6 or 7 miles from you, was not put out, I know you would have had to evacuate. And it's a scary thought. I always wondered that. For me, earthquakes are the things we got to worry about. But these days, fires are just a regular damn occurrence, and it really kills me. Any other thoughts about you want to mention the fires? Because I want to bring up 2 other topics since we got about 30 minutes left.
No, that's kind of it. I mean, there's all of these layers, like I was saying, that about the fire that have intrigued me, and we're not accusing anyone, and we're not calling it a conspiracy theory, but these are unanswered questions that I think need to be asked. How could these things happen in a normal wood fire? I mean, that just doesn't. This is not normal. You don't see metal melted from car bodies and running down the street in these pictures that are all over the internet right now. I mean, it's just it's really astonishing, and it makes you wonder. And then when they interviewed Jerry Brown this week, he was talking about getting help from the federal government, and Trump was going to help out and all of that. And but the stuff he said was, we've got to start designing cities better so that people have a way to escape. And to me, it just shows an utter lack of understanding of what the community in Malibu is like. It's not a normal city. It's not a city. It's people that have purchased homes there for privacy purposes. That's why you got so many celebrities and stars and rock musicians and rap artists and Robert Downey Jr. living up there, and people that are
one of his multiple homes.
Yeah, because they want to live. They want to look at the ocean in the morning. Yep. They don't want to have a whole bunch of houses around them. They want peace and quiet. They love being up in the canyons. It's beautiful up there. They don't want to live in a city. They don't want this solution Jerry Brown is trying to, put on them, because that's
Jerry, and then soon we're gonna have
that's like Agenda 21.
Newsom, and this is all fitting. And you know what? Speaking of Agenda 21 and conspiracies and false flags, I didn't mean to talk about this, but we might as well. We had that shooting a week ago in Thousand Oaks. That sounds fishy to me, because you have this guy coming in with extended clips on his Glock 45. I think it was Glock 22 shooting 45 caliber bullets. Correct me if I'm wrong on which Glock it was. The point was he had an extended clip. So
it was 45 caliber.
And he dropped smoke grenades in there, shooting indiscriminately, even killing California deputy. I don't know which department, maybe Ventura County Police or Sheriff. But the point is I think that could have been yet another false flag, because they do not want us in California to have guns. As a matter of fact, in order to get a concealed weapons permit here in California, it is so freaking hard. I know judges and DAs, district attorneys, that try hardcore gang cases. I mean, murders all the time. And of course, they have to worry about their own safety. You wipe out the prosecutor, sure, another one's going to get put in place to do the trial. But like even now with El Chapo, with the jury, the 2 jurors that were dismissed or not dismissed, that had to leave for anxiety, they're probably under threat. I would definitely think that.
Oh, no doubt.
Yeah. So what better? So if they can't get guns, I mean, the people who are truly being threatened on a regular basis and their families to carry with them to protect themselves, people who have a very clean record and deserve them, then who the hell's going to get one? They want us to be weaponless. And this is another thing I was mentioning recently too. You take away the guns from the people who are allowed to have them, the good civilians who are not violating laws, who only want them for target practice or maybe some self-defense, from people who are, performing licks, is so it's called as the street names now, or robberies. You should be able to have a right to defend yourself, but you remove them from the hands of the citizens that are not in violation of the law. That's not going to take away the street guns. And you can find choppers, which are AK-47, slang term for AK-47. I've been offered choppers for anywhere from $800 to $2,000. I mean, this is like a regular thing. I could buy a chopper from the street easier than I can go look for, probably, I hate to say this out loud, but certain drugs that, it's just so available. I every time someone wants to pawn off a gun on me, I don't even want to touch it. I don't want my fingerprints on it. You know what I mean? The point is the streets will never, ever give up their guns.
Oh,
no matter what they do, we're taking off the legal guns. You're just going to give more power to the criminals. And again, what the hell is the purpose of this unless they want to kill the population or keep us in fear? Because fear controls.
Yeah, no, all that you're saying, I agree with. I mean, we're at a phase here where the government is notoriously corrupt and lies to the people. So you never know really what is the actual truth. And you have to dig out as much information as you can and try to come up with your own conclusions. It's about all that we can do right now because the mainstream media is completely co-opted. In fact, I got a letter from Professor Eliyahu Rips, who's basically the guy who started the whole Torah code thing and has a brilliant mind. And he writes me occasionally because he's worried about America. He loves America. And he said that he's seen all of this before, that this is old communist technique to get into the schools and indoctrinate the kids at an early age in the way they want them to think, break down people's ability to think for themselves. And then that goes into politics and everything else. And so people, by the time they're old enough to be in government, they're completely thinking like a communist. And that's what we're dealing with right now. Back in when I grew up, we were taught American history and how people died for liberty and why this is such a great country. But now if you say something like that, you're radical. You're like, they accuse you of all sorts of things. It's ridiculous. You're a racist.
Yeah, that's true. That is true, and it's sad that
if you
CNN
completely
is
bring
dividing
in
people,
if you have no control over the illegal population coming in, if you don't put any kind of controls on that, then our culture becomes so diffused that the people coming in have no knowledge of American history or the Constitution or liberty or any of these things because they've never experienced it. And they don't know our language. A lot of them aren't into, studying all this stuff. They just want to make a living. So they're focused on making money and that's it. And they just want as much governmental handout as they can get. And the only person that is paying for that is the middle class. And a government cannot stand if it's divided against itself. Basically, eventually, the scales are going to tip the other direction. And we're really close to that. I really think that Trump is fighting that inevitability, that he's trying to do the best he can to protect America and what it stands for. But he has so many, he's hated by the left, the radical left, we'll call them, to such an extent that it's hard for him to do his job. And I wish they'd just leave him alone and let him do what he had planned to do.
I'm going to, because I want to fit in what we can in the next 20 some odd minutes, I'm going to change to something else because of where we are going as a society. And this actually a video that you had sent me that kicked off something in my head reminding me of 10 years ago. The housing bubble crash. If anyone out there has seen the movie, what's it? The Big Short.
The Big Short.
Yes, shorting. When they talk about shorting stocks or bonds, they're talking about betting against. And in 2000, I believe as early as 2006 throughout 2007, and in 2008 when the bubble finally burst, they were shorting things like CDOs, collateralized debt obligations. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, Rick, wasn't that a bunch of subprime, aka crap loans? And the creating agencies, Standard & Poor's as being one of them, or Moody's, what they would do is if you had a portfolio, or I think a CDO, with a bunch of diversified tranches, as they call them, of different layers of these bonds, subprimes, crap bonds, because they were considered diversified, they would get AAA ratings, despite these bonds being absolutely worthless. And you sent me this amazing video, and it started to scare me, especially with some of these housing prices and the change they've had in just a year. What the heck is happening, and why are we going through this?
Well, what a lot of people don't remember is that back in 2007 and 2008, the lenders, you'd get a loan for a house, and this happened to us at the time. You get a loan for a house, and the company that you had taken the loan out with would go out of business, and all of that information would be shifted over to another company. And then they started doing this thing where if you refinanced your house with a different company, they would pay you upfront cash to get your deal. And people would refinance over and over again to make money. I mean, isn't that crazy? But that's what was happening. And they didn't care if you could prove how much money you were making or anything. And it was just before the big crash, which happened 2008, 2009. We really felt it in 2009 because we were in the middle of Hollywood, and that's when, Hollywood went through a double whammy. I mean, for those of you interested in this, I mean, there was the stock market crash and the Fannie Mae Freddie Mac disaster, but then Hollywood was going through a technological revolution at the same time all this other stuff was going on. Basically, they were converting from a system based on film, physical film, like usually from Kodak or Fuji, in which they were making movies, and converting to digital. And so what a lot of people don't know is like there was like some 60 film cutting labs that closed within a year's time in Hollywood. And also a huge company that had been in business for 80 years called Pacific Title, which did all the credits for the movies and all that, went bankrupt. Because now you could do on your laptop using, Adobe After Effects or a program like that. You could do movie quality titles and render them out digitally, and you're done. And it costs virtually nothing to do it.
Yeah.
And they had something like $11 million in flying spot scanner equipment and all that. That was just pretty much like, well, what do we do with all this stuff now? So they got stuck in a double whammy. And then you had MGM International at the end of 2009 was $4 billion in debt. And they basically shut down for a while, sold off all their assets, and just basically had enough money to do the 007 movies. I mean, unless you were out here to experience it, you wouldn't know all this stuff. But that's when Tom Cruise was running the business, from what everyone told me. But it was a disaster. And so now housing prices back then fell to about maybe I'd say 50 or 60% of what the houses once were worth. And And now houses are like double the price of what they were back then, and no one can afford to buy a house because they're all like a million or more.
Yeah, yeah. When I saw that chart and it showed how many counties in California, I was blown away. I believe San Jose, and correct me if I'm wrong, if it was San Jose as opposed to San Francisco, the amount of $1 million homes was 70% which from 2017 to 2018 jumped to some 81% or something like that. That is beyond ridiculous. I'm shocked. But you know what? In Los Angeles, $1 million home these days is, you're lucky if you can get a 4-bedroom. The closer you are to the city, I couldn't even imagine what it costs living near where I lived in the apartment buildings of Park La Brea. But if you wanted to live across the street near the Grove, I would think even the smallest of the homes, maybe even a 1-story, a 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom or 3-bedroom, 1.5 bathroom, are well over $1 million. I mean, it's sad.
It all depends where you're buying. Like, it's crazy. I mean, and these houses aren't worth it. I mean, and if you find, like, in Simi Valley, most of the 4-bedroom houses are 980 to 1.1 million. That's just kind of the going rate. And depending on how much money you put down, you're looking at a $6,000 or $7,000 a month payment, unless you put down a huge heck of a lot of money. So, owning a house has become like something for the elites.
Yeah, it's like they're trying to push the middle class away. I mean, we've argued this for a long time off air, that the middle class is really being pushed apart. There will be no middle class soon. It's just going to be the majority of people in the lower class, and if they're lucky, there'll be some that are in the higher of the lower class, and then the rest of the people, the handful of people, will be the oligarchs of the upper class.
Well, yeah, and then LA was telling me today, like, if he rebuilds his house, then he has to go through 2 years of permits and regulations and all sorts of legal stuff that he has to go through just to rebuild his own house on his land that he owns. It's ridiculous. I mean, it's like, why do they think they have the authority to tell us how we're going to build our houses on land that we own? This is like a real problem. I think it's just, they put in so many regulations that basically it prevents you from making reparations. I mean, they even get into air conditioning. I mean, it has to be inspected, and they have to send somebody out. And it's like, this is if you change your condenser out, sitting outside. I mean, it's like they go, and say it's 105 degrees outside and your air conditioner breaks and you have to replace the system. You have to wait until you get someone from the state to come in and approve it. I mean, those are really, LA uses the word onerous, and I think it's really true. It's like, we need to get some of these regulations lifted so we can just live, because a free society can't operate this way.
That's right. And, I don't want to say horrible things about a class of people, but I had a recent guest who, because of his publisher bringing me Daniel Estalon, a huge Trumper, anti-deep state and this and that, so I figured this other person who I fit in last minute came from the same group. I got him on, and this was right after the midterms, so I said to him, it looks like we lost the lower house and gained the big house, kept the more seats in the Senate. And he goes, no, I think you got it backwards. And I think it's started to dawn on me, wait a minute, I think I'm talking to a Democrat here, and he was advocating for socialism and all these other things. But I don't understand what people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, what the heck is she going to do when she gets up there? I mean, she's
just
gonna
so
fold.
ignorant on so many levels. I think she just
true.
has a lot of personality, and that's all she's got. She doesn't know anything. I mean, I've heard what she's said about the Palestinians and all that. She's just been listening to the mainstream media. She has no clue of what's happening there. That's why I did the video that I'm selling on my website called The Truth About Gaza, because no one knows what the truth is. And I have some really recent information about that, because I just talked to Dan Gordon, who's a reservist for the IDF, and I don't know, because they haven't really reported on this, that just a couple days ago, Hamas fired 400 rockets into Israel. 400. And Israel isn't supposed to retaliate? And 400 rockets is more rockets than they've ever fired into Israel in a single day, even more than the 2014 war, where Hamas launched over a period of months a total of 4,600 rockets. But this is 400 in a single day, and they did it to try to overwhelm Iron Dome. And in some cases, they managed to do that, and they had some buildings that were blown up in Sderot, which is right on the border. But this was a smokescreen for Iran, because Iran wanted to build a new military base in Syria. So Hamas was doing this huge distraction so Iran could get in there and build a military base. And plus Iran was trying to get back at Trump for the sanctions. So they thought, okay, you don't like that? We'll just destroy Israel while we're at it. I mean, this is what Iran does.
Now, since we do have about 10 minutes left, real quick, for those people who don't know what Hamas is, where they originated, and how the heck, why they're so mad and even labeled as a terrorist group. Can you give a quick rundown for those people who have not been paying attention to that news?
Yeah, well, that's basically in 2005, Ariel Sharon, who was the president of Israel at the time, the prime minister, basically gave the Gaza Strip to the Palestinians. And there were Israelis that had lived there their whole lives, and they lost their homes. But they did it for peace. Okay, you can have the whole Gaza Strip for years. And it's really, I mean, I've been to that area. It's like prime real estate. It's right on the Mediterranean Sea. If you put some money into it, it could have been like a jewel for tourism and all of those things. What do? First thing they do is start building rockets and digging tunnels to attack Israel. Even though they were given this great land that Israel just gave them because they wanted peace. This is why people like Ocasio is so ignorant of the fact that that's happened, and talking about Palestinian refugees, or I don't know what else she was spouting the other day. It was so, when I was listening to her, I go, what? I mean, it wasn't even truthful, because she has no idea what she's talking about. They have their own land. This is their own country.
She mentioned the fact that Israel is actually invading, the Palestine. That was one of the things she said when she was running as a
No, they're not. They've given them the land. They gave them the whole Gaza Strip in 2005. It's a thing of history. It's happened a long time ago now. And what do? The first thing they do is try to invade Israel and fire rockets at them. And Hamas came in and basically took over. And they came in as a religious org, and people liked them. They thought, okay, they're going to give us some backbone here and all that. But they turned out to be really vile, hateful, terrible people. If you didn't do what Hamas said, first thing they do, and Dan told me the other day, and I recorded him telling me this, the first thing they do is shoot off your kneecaps if you say anything against Hamas. And how does Dan know that? Because some of these guys that have been punished by Hamas have struggled across the border wanting to be taken in the hospitals in Israel for treatment. This is really happening. And, you know, Hamas is just awful. So, you know, it's ongoing problem, and now they flared up again. And it's all basically under the control of Iran. Like Dan says, Hamas is Iran's poodle. They basically can do whatever they want to do with them. And then you've got Hezbollah, which is another terrorist organization, mostly based in Lebanon, and they have 100,000 missiles aimed at Israel. So there's bound to be some major flare-up within the next few weeks or months in the Middle East, because Iran is getting stretched because of finances, because they're the headquarters for terrorism in the world right now. That's what Iran is. This is why Trump is trying to put the squeeze on them, so they won't have any more money to give to terrorism. That's why he's doing this. He's absolutely correct in doing it. The so-called nuclear agreement we had with Iran was a joke. It was never signed. It was an unexecuted document. They had no intention of ever following it. It was only lip service. And we know that in the Middle East, there's this feeling that, you know, if you have to lie to push your agenda forward, then that's what you do. So, you know, it's like Israel just wants peace. They don't want to have all of this happening all the time. They don't want to have that. And the problem with the Palestinians, and I've been there and seen this, is that they don't know how to run a city. They don't know how to manage it. And they need Israel's help. And so Israel goes in and provides natural gas and power for the Palestinians, and Hamas destroys the gas lines and electric lines going in so they can use it for PR, saying how they're suffering so much because of Israel.
You know what really scared the crap out of me? And because I was able to see this, you tell me which one of the watchers it is. It was one of my favorites, actually, because you went out of the scope. And there was a wedding party in Palestine.
Oh, that's Watchers 9, Days of Chaos.
Go ahead and tell people what the hell happened at the wedding party.
I found this video on the net.
So grueling.
It was a guy that was on like an upper floor and looked like a cell phone camera he was using, and he was shooting video of a wedding going on across the street in a vacant lot. And they were singing, and they had plastic chairs outside, and everybody was dressed up. And Hamas came in with their military gear and just murdered everybody. Basically turned their machine guns on the entire wedding party, killed them all, crashed through all of the chairs. And then if you look closely in the video, the groom that was getting married was beaten in the head with a club until he was dead. That's what they did. And then they drove their trucks over the chairs, and basically there was no one that I know of that survived it. And they did it because they were singing at the wedding.
Yeah, and singing Christian songs, because wasn't it a Christian wedding?
It might have been. I don't know that much about it, but I mean, there's video of it. I mean, it's proof of what they do.
Oh, I remember, like you said, watching on the trucks, jumping out with all their AK-47s and just mowing everyone down. And what you said about the groom, didn't they make the poor guy watch them rape his wife or bride?
I don't think they raped anybody, but they held him up against the wall and beat him to death.
It's horrific. It's horrific.
That's Hamas.
Now, we are running really close out of time, and I want to have time for you to plug in. Let me just say one thing, a quick comment. Okay, Joel Skousen, the InfoWars World Affairs expert who comes on the show once a month for us, has been talking about the deep state is getting ready for us to sort of have some sort of nuclear attack that we're going to take to launch us into another world war. And the belligerents are going to be Russia and China. Now, you know that the Chinese just met with the Russians, and they made a comment that I'm paraphrasing here, that if the global standards or industry is setting new, I guess, goals or new ways to have trade, then maybe they're going to resort into separating into rival trading blocks, meaning that the Chinese and the Russians are working together, and this might be the division of the left and the West and the East, kind of like we had with the Soviet Union. What would you say about that? Again, knowing that we have a couple of minutes before, I want to give you time to plug things in and myself in as well.
Well, there's a lot of rumor in the internet right now about all of that stuff, including what's known as the GCR, the Global Currency Reset, and having asset-backed currency. Now, they said that on Tuesday of this week, we went to the gold standard again, but it hasn't been really officially announced. So proving that, I can't do it. And I don't know if it's true or not, but that's what's going out over the internet. They have said that China is now asset-backed. I don't know about Russia. It might be. I know that China and Russia decided to go off the dollar for buying oil, that they're using their Chinese yuan and Russian currency. They're using their own currency for that now. They've gone off the petrodollar.
Yes.
So that means that we have to do something to keep the dollar stable, but the dollar is doing really well right now. I mean, it's very stable now. Whether we're back on the gold standard or not, I don't know. They haven't made a public announcement of it that I've heard. And as usual, we hear everything through innuendos and through rumors, and half of them are not true.
Yeah.
And you have to kind of go, well, okay, I hope this is happening, but I have no proof that it is. There's no way to vet it. And yet I have a friend who knows people at the UN and at the Pentagon that give him inside information all the time about this and say what's imminent, it's about to happen. And every time we think it's going to happen, it never does. It's very confusing, and it's like super top secret, and no one knows when it's going to happen. But we think there's going to be either a big crash of the dollar or there's going to be a global currency reset.
Yep.
And maybe both things will happen simultaneously, but everybody's saying to have a month's worth of food stored up, be ready for it. Some kind of a disaster.
Like you said, when you said global, this is one of the things that reminded me of one of the videos that you sent me that I was talking about the housing bubble. It's not just the United States when you're dealing with the central banks of other parts of the world, like the European Central Bank and things like that.
Yeah, and we know really like Deutsche Bank is like insolvent at this point.
Unfortunately, Richard, we are out of time. We went a couple minutes over. I do want to have you plug in. First of all, I want to thank you. As always, we enjoy having you on here, and it's so cool. We could talk
my pleasure.
So many different topics. Real quick, Richard Shaw, everyone, I want to give him thanks and a round of applause. Do plug in your websites and anything you're working on right now.
Yeah, we're working on a couple projects. One is called Project X-Ray. It's about the tunnels and caves under Jerusalem and what might be down there. There's a lot of theories about that. We're trying to get it funded. It's an incredibly intriguing project. Another thing is I have a video that's up that has just recently been pressed to DVD that's available on my website called The Truth About Gaza. If you want to know really what Hamas is doing and all of the stuff that the mainstream media won't actually tell you as far as the truthful stuff that's going on over there, get it. It's not expensive. It's like $15. You can get a DVD or you can stream it on Vimeo for about $7.50, I think it is. So please do that. It helps us stay alive while we're working on these other projects.
Well, again, thank you, Richard. Now, let me say some thanks. First of all, to people that are helping behind the scenes. for my team is Adam Keene, and he is helping a lot with being a moderator on my YouTube channel and editor. We also have Pam Brettenberg, social media manager. I want to give them both shout outs. And two people I really thank who actually brought me out of my radio silence is Katie and Daryl Neely, the L&M station managers and audio engineers for this show and others. They're very hands-on, and my heart goes out to them and to thank them very much. Also in the United Kingdom, we have JC of Deprogrammed Radio Network. Those are the people I do want to plug in. Now, soon, folks, on the website, we will be launching the archives. It should be ready in a handful of days and leading up to Thanksgiving, if not right around there. And they'll be cheaper than other people's. And not only will you get the archives from the time I've been on L&M, we will fill as many going back to March 2013 as you can get your hands on. That way you can download them, listen to them on your own time. Now, remember what I told you during the show. The name, everything you need to know about the show, everything is the name of it. It's so simple. You want to think about, how do I find the website, or how do I find the Twitter? It's the name of the show, Dr. J Radio Live. That is DrJ Radio Live. For instance, the website, DrJRadioLive.com. Like I said, DrJ Radio Live, or the @ symbol, DrJ Radio Live. Again, that is for minds.com. If you haven't opened up an account, please do, because it pays you in Ethereum-based tokens just for using activity. It's also open source, and they do not sell information like Facebook or censor you. Patreon is a place where you can actually get some benefits for this show. And every other social media account with that name, I'm just going to list whatever I remember off the top of my head. There's Facebook, there's Twitter, there's Instagram, Flickr, there's Tumblr, of course, YouTube, for those of you watching it right now. There, of course, Google Plus, Gmail, which I don't really check emails very often, so that may not be the best way to try to get a hold of me. You may want to try tagging me at Twitter. Buffer is a new one that I just opened. Pinterest, and just whatever you could think of, folks. It's at Dr. J Radio Live. Well, with that being said, join us Monday for some fresh new programming, and I do hope you enjoy today's surprise live show, and also this past couple days of mishaps. And hey, welcome to live radio. Things like this happen. So for those in the UK, EU, and east of that, I want to tell you all good morning and good day. For those of you in Hawaii, well, hey, good day to you right now. But for those like me and Richard in the West Coast, it's good evening. And for those in the East Coast of the United States, well, I want to wish you all a good night. With that being said, folks, remember pinlight.com, at Dr. J Radio Live. Again, DrJRadioLive.com for the website. With that being said, now I am signing off.